Hello and welcome to the AIM webinar series. AIM is an alliance enabling the cooperation, development, and standardization of AIDC technologies. From barcodes to RFID to IoT, AIM is your advocate. Any organization with an interest in data collection is a beneficiary of these efforts. Membership provides an opportunity to influence the direction of the industry, develop policies and standards, access market reports, and engage new partners. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to go over. First is our antitrust policy. It's the policy of AIM Inc. to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. And our collaboration and work product policy states that webinars like today's are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM's developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. You'll also notice that you are muted. You'll be muted throughout the webinar, but if you have any questions, you can send those to me through the Q&A option, which is located at the bottom of the application screen, or you could chat those to me as well. We'll answer questions at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar is being recorded, and you'll be emailed when it is available for viewing. Today, I'm here with Kimberly McCann, Engineering Lead at Reith Technology. Kimberly will be discussing the role of data in scaling the circular economy. Welcome, Kimberly, and why don't you tell the audience a little more about yourself?
Hi, thanks, Mike. So firstly, thank you everyone for coming today. So as mentioned, I'm Kimberly McCann. I currently work at a company named Reith as their engineering lead. So Reith is a startup based in Edinburgh in Scotland. And what we are doing is we're looking at how we can start to tackle the challenge of single-use systems and ultimately look at how we can make reuse more common than single use. In my role at Reith, I'm responsible for the engineering team, and they're the team who build the product that help tackle this problem. So previous to Reith, I've worked at NHS Scotland, so scaling their systems nationally, and at Podfather, who are a company specializing in logistics software. In both of those roles, I've been looking at how we can use technology and data to look at scaling processes and starting to make things a bit more efficient. So as mentioned, today I'll be talking to you about the role that data can play in enabling companies to become a bit more circular and start to embrace a reuse model. So I'll start by introducing some of the concepts of the circular economy and reuse. I'll then go on to talk about some of the challenges in this space, both for operating and scaling circular practices. And then we can look at how data and collaboration can start to help overcome some of those challenges. So I'm going to start off with a big statement, and that's our linear systems are broken. So if you don't know what a linear system is, well, we can currently define our existing economy as a linear system. So our current economy, it operates a take, make, and waste system. So you think of that as taking materials from the earth, making products from them, and eventually throwing them away as waste. And most of this waste actually ends up in landfills or in incinerators and is eventually completely lost. Now, even if we take into consideration recycling, only 9% of all of the plastic that's ever been made has actually ever been recycled. And our environmental impact is really just compounding. This isn't really a system that I think can work in the long term, especially on a planet with finite resources. So we need to start to look at what some of the alternatives are. And one of those alternatives is the circular economy. So in a circular economy, we'll stop waste being produced in the first place. If you've never heard of it before, it's based on these kind of three principles, all driven by design. So going around this kind of circle here, we've got the three principles. First is designing out waste and pollution. Then we've got keeping products and materials in use at their highest value. Then we've got regenerating natural systems. And all three of these principles, they're kind of underpinned by this transition to renewable energy and materials that we're going through. So in a circular economy, we'll look to decouple economic activity from the consumption of resources. And it's a system that will be good for hopefully businesses, people, and the environment. So current estimates put us at roughly 8.6% of the world being circular. And to be able to transform from a linear circular system to a circular one, we need to transform the way we think about things and start to really evaluate our existing processes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through these three principles in a little bit more depth. So up first is the principle of eliminating waste and pollution. So I want you to ask yourself a question. What if waste and pollution was never created in the first place? So waste and pollution are often not actually accidents, but they're the consequences of decisions made at the design stage. Usually these decisions are made in relation to the materials being used in the product or its packaging. Around 80% of the environmental impacts are determined at the design stage. They're baked into the product or service from its beginning. If we were in a circular economy, we would be thinking about the end of life for our products and the waste that they produce as part of the initial design stage, rather than at the end as an afterthought. So I've got some examples here on companies embracing the no waste principle. So on the left here, we've got Appeal. So they're a US company and they look to create an edible coating product that they put on fruit and veg, and it helps the fruit last twice as long. So when we think of fruit packaging just now, it's quite often put in plastic packaging, and this eventually ends up creating waste. And this solution by Appeal actually avoids this waste being created in the first place. On the right here, we've got Lush. So they're a UK cosmetics retailer, and they sell some of their products completely packaging free. So in this picture, we've got some bath products. The consumer will buy the product just like this, take it home with them, use it all up, and there's no packaging to throw away or recycle at all. So moving on to the second principle of the circular economy. So that was to circulate products and materials at their highest value. And what this means is it is keeping materials in use, either as the original product that was created for, or if that can't be used anymore, as the components or raw materials. And this way, nothing becomes waste and the value of products and materials are retained. So I want you to ask yourself another question. So what if we could build an economy that uses things rather than uses them up? So in a circular economy, we would favor activities and products that preserve the value of energy, labor, and materials. And this would mean designing with durability, reuse, and recycling in mind. And we'd have the aim of keeping all of these products, components, or materials circulating in our existing economy. So again, I've got some examples of companies embracing the circular products and materials principle. So on the left here, we've got a product by a company named Aeropowder. So they create insulated packaging from surplus feathers. So currently thermal packaging, it's often made from harmful materials such as polystyrene, whereas their product Plumo, the components are renewable and completely biodegradable. On the right here, we've got ThreadUp. So they're an online thrift store where you can buy and sell clothes. So currently, 73% of clothing is actually sent to landfill or incinerated, and 95% of that could actually have been reused or recycled. So ThreadUp, by enabling the resale of clothes, they're ensuring that products stay on the market and avoid going to landfill incineration. Moving on to the third principle, which was to regenerate nature. So by moving away from a linear economy to a circular economy, we can start to support natural processes and leave room for nature to start to thrive. So again, I've got another question for you. What if we could not only protect, but actively improve the environment? In nature, there isn't really a concept of waste, and the outputs of one process is often used for the inputs of another. So if we think about autumn or fall, when the leaves start to fall from the tree, and they go on to start to feed the forest. In a circular economy, we would avoid the use of non-renewable resources. And we'd start to look at what resources can we use that preserve or enhance our existing ones. So in this model, nature is a really good example, and we can start to look at how we can emulate our natural systems. So an example of a company embracing the regenerative nature principle is CCM Technologies. So they create beneficial agriculture products such as fertilizer, and they make this from industrial waste. And these fertilizer products can be used in regenerative agriculture, and that can help benefit the soil structure, improve water storage, and start to create a thriving microorganism population. And all of this contributes to natural soil regeneration and helping kind of nature out a little bit. So that's what the circular economy is, but there's a huge question of how we actually get there. So we're starting to see legislation and targets pave the way, and there's been quite an announcement of quite a few of these, which I've tried to detail on this slide, and I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit, not too much depth because they're quite complex, but a little snippet of each of these. So going to the left of the scale, in 2020, we saw the European Commission adopt the new Circular Economy Action Plan. And this formed one of the main building blocks for the European Green Deal. So this plan announces initiatives across the entire life cycle of products. And it starts to target how products are designed. It looks at promoting circular economy processes, and ultimately is aiming to prevent waste and keep resources in the EU economy for as long as possible. Then we've got the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. So this is an industry-founded organisation, and it has members such as PepsiCo and P&G. And that kind of industry group has promised to spend $1.5 billion by 2024 to reduce plastic pollution. We're also starting to see the introduction of additional taxes. So literally just last month, the UK brought in a plastic packaging tax, and this is hoping to encourage businesses to use more recycled plastic. And that tax applies to anyone who's using less than 30% recycled content. On all of these taxes, we're starting to see more kind of extended producer responsibility implementations globally. So that's a taxing strategy which says that the environmental cost of a product should actually be added to the price of the product. And we've started to see this come into play in some of the waste streams in Europe, such as packaging waste and batteries. And we've also recently seen the state of Maine bring in their own EPR legislation, and the UK are also aiming to put this in place by 2024. Moving along to the kind of 2025 section of this line graph, we've got the UK Plastics Pact, which is hoping to be in place by 2025. So this is led by WRAP, and it's the first of a global network of pacts, all enabled by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's New Plastic Economy Initiative. So this pact, it has 4 different targets. The first is to eliminate problematic or unnecessary single-use packaging. The second is 100% of plastic packaging should be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. The third one is 70% of plastics packaging should be effectively recycled or composted. And then 30% of average recycled content across all plastics packaging. This is quite a lot. If we move on to 2030 as well, we've got the B Corp Net Zero. So this is where 1,700 companies have come together and are aiming to be net zero by 2030. And this applies to both their scope 1, their scope 2, and most of their scope 3 emissions. So they're really trying to make a difference here. Going further on there, we saw Chile release a circular roadmap and that has 7 goals to transition the country from linear to circular economy by 2040. It has some kind of intermediate goals in 2030 as well. And these goals cover areas such as creating green jobs, reducing waste production, increasing the recycling rates, and making materials generally more productive. We've also saw Chile recently introduce laws regulating single-use plastics and roll out their own extended producer responsibility legislation. And then all the way over to 2050, we've got carbon net zero. So I'm sure some people will be aware that a number of countries have set legally binding net zero targets that they're hoping to come into play over the next 30 years. And that includes the UK, where I'm based, which have a target for net zero by 2050. Some countries are a bit earlier. So there's a lot of different pieces of legislation, and all of these are going to start to lead to behaviour change and increase support for the circular economy and net zero targets. We can also see the reuse landscape. It's changing. So reuse is no longer a thing you just see for local milk delivery services or your local small refill store. And it's actually something everyone is starting to want to be a part of, just as a way of engaging with consumers and, well, reducing their environmental impact. So when I was putting this presentation together, I pulled out a few of the kind of news articles that were coming up that week alone. And I've put these on the slide here. So just to kind of read them out a little bit for you. The first one we saw is the Burger King in the UK. So they've announced that they are starting trials of reusable packaging on just a few of their product lines, with the hope that if this pilot is successful, they'll roll out to more product lines and more stores. We've also seen the Body Shop decide to roll out their refill stations to all of their 3,000 global stores. And this came after their own successful trial in, I think it was 400 stores. And they're going to start by rolling this out to all of their US stores. And then Coca-Cola recently committed to making 25% of their packaging reusable or refillable by 2030. And I thought this article was really interesting because it starts to kind of put companies up against other companies and encourage competitors to bring out similar commitments. And that's really good to see. And I'm hopeful that other companies will start to follow in the footprints. So, yeah. So we know that businesses are increasingly adopting reuse models for both economic and environmental benefits. We also know that there's a huge market opportunity available here for businesses, and it's currently estimated that it's actually an over $10 billion opportunity for the reusable packaging industry. So we need to look at how do we do reuse? And there are actually 4 different reuse models that have been identified by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So they're on this kind of circle on the right here, and we've got refill at home, return from home, return on the go, and refill on the go. So I'm going to go into depth a little bit about what each of these models are, some examples of companies that are implementing it, and maybe the benefits and challenges of all of these. So at first, we're going to look at refill at home. So that's where users are able to refill their own reusable container at home. So an example of this model is a company named Bauer Collective. So they're a home and personal care consumer goods company here in the UK. So they send out these refill pouches, which are pictured on the slides here, and they're filled up with products such as hand wash, soaps, shampoos, and so on. So the user will receive this at home, they'll fill up their own container with the product, and then they can send the refill pouch back to Bauer Collective using like a prepaid envelope. So some of the benefits of this model, well, firstly, businesses can start to reduce their transportation and packaging costs simply by supplying refills or concentrates or tablets, and these usually come in slightly smaller packaging or less in general. They're often cheaper for consumers to buy compared to products sold in standard packaging. And that's just, again, because you don't have to pay the additional packaging costs, which is something we're going to see increase further as more legislation is introduced to tax plastic packaging. And then another benefit of this model is that they're often actually set up as subscription services. So this can make things a bit more convenient for customers because the product just arrives kind of when they need it. And it can start to encourage brand loyalty for some of these brands. The refill at home model does come with some challenges though. So we need to ensure whatever packaging we're replacing our original single-use packaging with, we need to make sure that's sustainable as well. There's no point getting a refill pouch that's actually worse than the single-use pouch that it was originally in. And we need to be thinking about the end of life of these refillable pouches as well, and making sure that that's environmentally friendly as well. Another challenge is communicating the benefits to customers. Refill can be quite new for people, so they need to understand how to do it and also why this is better for the environment. Up next is return from home. So that allows packaging to be picked up from home by a pickup service. So an example of this that people might be familiar with is your local milk delivery service, or the example I've popped in the slides here, which is Draft Drop. So they're a company based in London who deliver draft beers straight to your door in returnable bottles. So next time you place an order, they'll drop off your new beers and they'll take away your old ones. Very convenient. So the benefits of this model is that businesses can start to improve brand loyalty, and that's through incentivizing the return of the packaging, often through deposit and reward schemes. Businesses can also start to optimize their operations a little bit by standardizing the packaging. If you don't need to make your packaging something that consumers see when they go into stores because it's just being delivered directly to them, then you don't need to have as many different variations of this. And then for the consumer, it's pretty convenient. They don't need to make an additional journey to go return their packaging. It just kind of gets picked up and dropped off at home. So yeah, that's really easy for them. But yeah, this model has some challenges as well. And the main one is the kind of reverse logistics aspect to it. We need to be able to collect the packaging, and a lot of these reverse logistic routes just simply don't exist. They needed to be created from scratch. And then once you have them in place, they can be quite difficult to scale, especially for smaller businesses who would need to put on additional routes, which can be like an additional cost for them. We also have refill on the go. So that allows users to refill their reusable container away from home. So refill stores are a really good example of this. In the slide here is a picture of the refill aisle in Marks and Spencer's, which is one of the big supermarkets here in the UK. So in this example, you would take your containers to the store. In store, they'll have these kind of bulk containers that are filled with products such as pasta, rice, cereals, maybe some sweets. And you'll fill up your container and go and pay for this and take it home. So some of the benefits of this model are it allows users' individual needs to be accommodated. So in this model, you can just get exactly the amount of pasta or rice that you want. You don't need to buy some of those kind of larger bags. From a business point of view, you can start to reduce transportation and packaging costs, and that can be by maybe supplying concentrates or using bulk shipping containers. But this model comes with challenges as well. So customers need to remember to bring their own packaging, which can be difficult if it's not something they're used to. And if they don't bring the packaging, their own kind of container, then you either need to provide a suitable alternative, which needs to be kind of environmentally friendly as well, or they're just not going to use the station. It can also be difficult to choose the appropriate product lines. So some products can be a bit messy, especially liquids, which could spill onto the floor and maybe become a trip hazard if you're not on top of that. And then we need to also make sure that these refill stations are easy to use. If a customer has never seen these before, it can be a bit intimidating. They might not know what to do. So it's really important that we're educating people on how to use them and the benefits. Moving on, we've got the last one, which is return on the go. So that allows users to return their packaging to a drop-off point. So an example of this model is Beauty Kitchen. So they're a cosmetics company who you can buy a bottle of their product and return the empty bottles to the store when you pick up a new one. Here in the UK, they partner with a store named Holland & Barrett, and they put these drop-off points into their stores. And when you return your packaging, you can earn reward points with Holland & Barrett. So the benefits of this model, well, a really clear one that I've kind of hinted at there is brand loyalty. So you can use those deposit and reward schemes to incentivize not only to return their packaging, but to kind of engage with the business in general. And then businesses can also start to optimize their operations through maybe shared drop-off points or logistic routes. So in the example I gave there, Beauty Kitchen, we're using another company's store as a drop-off point, and this can be kind of sharing some of the costs. So there are some challenges to this model as well. And a big one is choosing that deposit and reward scheme. So we've seen quite a few people trying out different things. And this can range from maybe an upfront payment for the container or maybe membership points for returning the packaging, as I mentioned. And one of the things that we need to be careful here is that we're striking the balance between the cost of the loss of the packaging and also not scaring away customers just because the initial cost is too much for them. Then if you do choose to do a deposit and reward scheme, you also probably need a system to keep track of this and handle any payments. And with every system, developing it can be expensive and complex. And then another challenge is picking the location of your drop-off points. So these need to be convenient for customers. We don't really want them to be going out of their way just to return a piece of packaging. Otherwise, it just makes it even less likely that they will actually return that piece of packaging. So that is the kind of 4 reuse models that you can use. But there are also some barriers to operating a scalable and safe reuse system. So on the slide, we've got a list of kind of some of the challenges that we've seen. There might be more as well, but to kind of go through them one by one. Up first is safety and legislation compliance can be challenging. So when we think of product recalls or batch information and labels, they're all kind of based on a piece of packaging just being used once, and it doesn't take into consideration that a piece of packaging might not actually have the same product in it. So all of the safety and legislation rules have kind of been written with this assumption in mind. For environmental reporting requirements, this can also be a challenge. And it's simply because quite a lot of environmental reporting is actually linked to sales data. And that's just because it's easy. In a linear system, one sale usually means one piece of packaging. So it's just easy to use those figures for that. But yeah, in a circular system, that's not really equatable. So we need to know how many times a piece of packaging has been used to actually understand its environmental impact. There are also some operational challenges. A good example of this is the location and the volume of available reusable assets. So if you think about a circular system, you don't actually need as many pieces of packaging available to you just because you're expecting to reuse them. So it's really important that you know where they are and how many you have to be able to carry out your operations. There's also a lack of predictability. Since reuse is new, we're missing the information to make predictions about things, such as how long is our reuse cycle likely to take. In the end, yeah, because reuse is so new, businesses lack a lot of insights. There's currently a lack of understanding around what a good reuse rate will look like and how to optimize one. There's also a fine line between creating a piece of packaging that's really durable so that it can be reused, but it's not too durable that you waste money if it's not reused. So another thing we need insights into is how do we know how durable our packaging should be, and do we need to optimize this? And yeah, to overcome all of those challenges, we really need data. And yeah, our hypothesis here at Reith is that if we had all of that data, then we could start to address all of those challenges. So we go back to those 5 challenges I just mentioned. If we had data, then we could start to ensure safety and legislation compliance. And this can be done by attributing batch information to the reusable packaging on a unique packaging level. With that information, we can then use it to inform the customer of information about their product and start to help with product recalls. So in that scenario I mentioned before, where a piece of packaging could have multiple products, we'll know exactly what's inside of it. And then if we have data on each individual piece of packaging, for example, where it's been and how many times it's been reused, then actually environmental reporting gets easier and more accurate. We have a much better idea of kind of what's going on with this piece of packaging. We can also start to remove the guesswork in operations if we had the data. So the operational challenges would be aided by tracking exactly where the piece of packaging is, information about its current state, and yeah, taking out some of the guesswork that comes when you move to a reuse model. We can also start to use all that data to increase the predictability and create insights. So if we had the data, we'd start to learn and make predictions about what the average reuse cycle looks like for a product, and we can start to take all that to inform our decision making. And then the challenge of when to invest in making our packaging more durable, it just kind of becomes a bit easier, and we'll start to know which of our schemes are working best to encourage return rates. One of the things we realized early on is this is a huge problem and quite a few people are looking at it. And it's not really a problem that any one person or company can solve alone. And we really need to make sure that everyone is talking the same language. So here at Reith, we applied for a grant from the Innovate UK Smart Sustainable Plastics Packaging Fund. And this was to start to build one of the foundation blocks for reuse products, which is an open data standard. If you've never heard of an open data standard before, then these are standards for data which are usually documented, reusable agreements that help people and organizations to publish, access, share, and use better quality data. So some reasons that they might be developed for are to agree on a common model or a common language, or to share information consistently, or to promote a common understanding and shared vision. So we worked with the Open Data Institute and Lancaster University, and we looked to create a reusable packaging standard. And by creating an open data standard, we were creating a shared understanding of what reuse looks like and making this accessible for anyone who wants to be involved in reuse. So in order to create our open data standard, we looked at using a human-centered design process. this was really important to us because we wanted to make sure we were involving all of the end users, just because it needed to be a shared standard. And if everyone's not on board, then it doesn't really become a standard. So we started off by researching and designing the standard. Through this process, we kind of mapped out the entire ecosystem and started to kind of do interviews with key stakeholders. So doing this kind of ecosystem map really helped us identify who we needed to speak to. And in our case, this meant anyone who was involved in production, the use, the sale, and the disposal of packaging. This kind of ecosystem map also helped us surface existing data sets. So in our case, we actually found out about the National Waste Database, for example. And it also helped us map out all of the existing data flows that people were using, which let us know who currently generates data, who's currently collecting the data, and who needs what. So we took all of the information that we collected through kind of the research and design process, and we started to synthesize these by grouping together all the use cases and themes to try and pull out some findings. So this led us to pull out all of the data fields that need to be captured by someone implementing a reuse system. And then all of those data fields went on to become part of the reuse standard. But it doesn't really stop there. The reuse landscape is evolving constantly, just as we learn more and more about how businesses and consumers want reuse to work. So as a result of that, we need to kind of continuously be assessing the standard and updating it based on any feedback that any of the stakeholders have. So the outputs of all that research are kind of listed here. So the first was a Reuse.id white paper, and that details how digital infrastructure can start to speed up the adoption of scalable reuse systems. And this is available to download through our website, which I'll pop up at the end. A reuse standard was created, and this is available for anyone to use. And we definitely encourage anyone in the reuse space to check it out, use it, or give any feedback that they might have. So this is available at reuse-standard.org, and can also be found on our GitHub if you're interested in that too. So it's completely open source, so anyone is able to take advantage of this and contribute if they're interested. We've also since had a paper published in the Academic Journal of Sustainable Production and Consumption. So if you're interested in reading more about that, the title of the paper is Circular Economy Infrastructure, Why We Need Track and Trace for Reusable Packaging. And if you can't find that, just drop me an email. I'll be happy to share that kind of academic piece with anyone. And then, yeah, kind of separate from all the academic study parts of it, we went on to reuse this data standard to help define the data model used within Reef's commercial product, which looks at providing a track and trace solution. But if you're interested in putting together your own data standard, we would absolutely recommend heading over to the Open Data Institute's website. So they have a bunch of tools and resources, and it's all explicitly designed for helping you design an open data standard. And it was honestly a goldmine for this project. We'd definitely recommend it. So what do we think the future looks like? So to us, we think we're starting to enter a circular era. We're already seeing businesses moving towards reuse initiatives, and we're really hopeful that this will continue to grow. We're already starting to get more data insights and are using these insights to kind of adjust our reuse models. And we're already seeing customers rewarding brands for going circular, which is amazing to see. But to be able to do this at a larger scale, we need to be open to kind of sharing those insights and learnings with one another. And here in the UK, we've already seen groups of people starting to form to tackle some of these problems together and share solutions. And we're really hopeful that more partnerships can start to be formed to kind of do the same thing with the remaining challenges in the reuse space. So I mentioned some additional challenges there. Even with the ability to collect all of this data and generate all those insights, there's still some kind of tough parts in this space that need to be developed further. The one that's most applicable for this group, I think, is tagging. So to be able to capture all that data around individual pieces of packaging and to get the traceability that we need, people need to tag each of the pieces of packaging individually. So we often see people using QR codes or RFID tags to track their assets, and this can be quite a tough decision for them to make, just because it can be costly to invest in tags that you might never ever get back. And then there's kind of additional kind of requirements for some of the people we see where if they have a washing aspect to their reuse, then we need to make sure that the tag can support that and isn't going to be damaged and washed away. So there's quite a lot of things for people to think about, and there's kind of lots of different trade-offs, and that could be challenging for some people. Another challenge we see is engaging customers. So one of the things I mentioned previously is that if we want to do reuse well, then return rates and customer engagement is really going to be key to this. So we need to make sure we're educating people on how reuse works, especially since this is so new to them. And we also need to make sure that we're engaging with customers to get feedback on our reuse systems. That way we can start to adapt and learn what works for everyone. Then yeah, cleaning can be a bit of a challenge. When packaging is returned, we really need to make sure we're following health and safety standards and cleaning it to the appropriate level. This isn't something we've had to do with packaging on a large scale before, and working out a safe, cost-effective and efficient way to clean packaging can be a challenge. And then yeah, the cleaning and tagging is kind of interlinked because we need to make sure they don't damage tags, or that we're choosing tags that can withstand it. And then yeah, reverse logistics is the last one. We're really good at getting products into customers' hands, but we're not as good at getting them back. Reverse logistic lines really need to be set up for reuse processes to work efficiently. We see this issue quite a bit in the fashion industry, where returns are often actually sent to landfill rather than actually put back into the system, which is quite disappointing. But yeah, all four of these are still quite a big challenge. So if anyone's working in any of these spaces, then feel free to reach out. I'd love to have a conversation with anyone in this space. I'm a big believer that we can only solve these huge problems if we work together and encourage collaboration. So yeah, that's me. So I just want to say thanks everyone who came along for listening. If any of the resources I've mentioned today or any of the figures are something that you're interested in, then feel free to send me an email or connect on LinkedIn. Other than that, I'll open up to any questions.
Great, thanks, Kim. We do have a few questions here, so I'll get started with those. Where, in your opinion, within a business process, would you suggest to start implementing circularity? Like, where should someone start at?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it really depends on the business. If there's something that could be a quick and easy win, I would recommend doing that. Because it's all about kind of gaining traction, I think. I don't think there's like one area where I would say you should definitely go and do this. It's just if you can get the small wins, then take those. The main area we focus in is kind of the plastic packaging side of stuff, just because it's a huge problem, but that can be challenging. I would recommend kind of looking at your whole process and seeing if there's anywhere early on in the process that you can start to look at circular processes, just because the further down you get, the harder it can be.
Great. Another question we have is, what are products or programs that you think might entice users to take responsible or to make responsible purchasing decisions?
So can you repeat that one?
So yeah, what are products or programs that would entice users to take responsible purchase or to make responsible purchasing decisions?
So I think the main thing is that we've just got to make it easier for people and cheaper. So a lot of the things I was talking about kind of at the start of my presentation was about legislation. So right now, in most places, it's actually can be more expensive and inconvenient to consumers to kind of shop on these kind of reuse models. But the legislation will start to make it a bit more expensive for not doing reuse just because of all the plastic packaging. And I think that will start to tip the scale and start to reward kind of consumers in a way. Without that legislation, I think it'll be pretty difficult. But we can start to, some of the things we've seen is kind of giving people reward points to shop in store for buying these kind of products and returning things. Does that answer the question?
I think so. And then I guess to wrap things up, we did get a question about your contact information here. Kim, is it okay?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
It's right up on the screen now. So yeah, I'll give a moment for everyone to take that down. And again, we'll have a recording of this webinar as well. So all this information can be accessed. Oh, we got another question. How can the benefits of circularity be balanced against the cost of additional logistics?
It's a great question. I think we need to start thinking in the long term. I think in the short term, the cost is really, really high. But as we start to kind of implement these circular processes, we're going to get better at it, right? It's not going to be as large a cost, especially as we start to kind of share logistic routes and kind of share all these insights. So that'll help the costs come down. And then the benefits, well, I guess my view is that the benefits of kind of reducing plastic consumption is a huge one. And especially when you think about some of these kind of IPCC reports that are coming out, circularity is kind of what we need to kind of achieve those goals. So I personally think that the benefits are massive and the costs will come down.
Okay. And I think that wraps it up for the questions here. Kim, thank you so much for your time and insights today. Greatly appreciate it.
It's all right. I was happy to do it.